You know, that's a very good question. I would like to know that myself. Because most of these highbrow scholars are in Harvard, Yale, William and Mary, Stanford. These are the Ivy League schools that were once upon a time Bible seminaries. I don't know if you know that or not, but once upon a time, Harvard was developed as a Protestant seminary. And now, it's completely lost that. It's completely lost that. A lot of this came as a result of the turn of the last century. Most of this that has infected the church, and I use that word deliberately, came about from the end of the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th. With the advent of a lot of this biblical scholarship, a lot of this biblical archaeology, people started criticizing the scriptures for a living, to make names for themselves. And like Hitler said, you tell a lie big enough and people begin to believe it. And that's part of what converted, yes, I will say that word, converted, these mainline, hardcore, conservative Bible seminaries into what they are today. And what Bible seminaries? Harvard, Yale, William and Mary, Stanford, etc. They all converted into this accepting of this kind of criticism, unquestioned, and just ran with it. And it's just the party line now in liberal scholarship. It just is. Okay? Let me get through the rest of this. The question is authority, and it does make a big difference if Moses authored the books of the Torah or a group of unknown priests and scribes. It does make a difference. It does matter, I would argue. Because if Moses didn't write these books, then who did, and who are they? And where do they get off telling me that the Ten Commandments are this, then? Oh, I said the Ten Commandments, didn't I? Yeah, I said it. See that? It makes a big difference if I tell you adultery is wrong, and if Jesus tells you adultery is wrong, doesn't it? It's an issue of authority. That's why it matters. That's why, because if we can question the authority of who wrote the Bible, then we can question the authority of the church. Where does the church get off telling me that contraception is wrong? Where does the church get off telling me murder is a sin? Where does the church get off forcing me to go to Sunday Mass all the time? You see that? Because if the Bible is just an ordinary book, then the church is just filled with ordinary men. And where do they get off telling me how to run my life? It's an issue of authority. You see the difference? If the Bible is just a book, then the church is just filled with old men who don't know anything about modern times and need to get with it. Doesn't this sound a little familiar? But if the Bible is an inspired book of both God and men, then the church is run by the Holy Spirit through the men that He appointed, and that makes all the difference. You see the difference, my brothers and sisters? That's why this issue is so important. So, what are some arguments in favor that Moses did write this book? Well, there's a lot, I would say. There are several good arguments to be made. I would refer you to your commentary on Genesis in here for the arguments in favor of authorship by Moses. It's on page 13 in your Genesis commentary. And he spends almost 2 full pages on this idea of authorship. Who authored the Pentateuch? And I would strongly encourage you to read it because it's an excellent synthesis of the best of modern scholarship has to offer, along with keeping true to the traditional ideas that we have and where they came from. So it's not an either-or thing, all right? It's both. There is some value out of modern scholarship that can be gleaned. It's not all bad. Their methodology is actually very good. It helps us to winnow away the falsehood from the legends and myths that we've adopted as truth and get to some hardcore evidence for this. Okay? So it's not all bad. But the one thing I would like to start with is Jesus. He said in John 5, if you believed Moses, you would believe me. Why? He what?
He wrote of me.
Jesus said, Moses wrote of me. Did you hear that? But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? Did you hear what Jesus said? He said, had you believed Moses, you'd believe me, because he wrote of me. Now, I remember confronting someone in the parish that I got confirmed in about this, because this kind of scholarship hit me right in the face when I was first converting. And I asked them, I said, what did Jesus mean by this? If he said that Moses wrote of him, if Moses didn't write the book of Genesis. And their response was this, well, you have to understand. Right there's a big red flag to me. Big red flag. I said, all right, let's hear your tripe. He goes, well, you know, Jesus was speaking to, dim-witted people who believed that Moses actually wrote the book. And he didn't have the time to really explain to them that they were really wrong, So he just kind of went along with the popular idea to just, to get to his point. His real point is that they're disbelieving in him and his words. It has nothing really to do with Jesus affirming that Moses actually authored anything in the Old Testament. I go, really? So Jesus was wrong. Isn't that what you're saying?
According to them.
He basically said to me, Jesus was wrong. Jesus didn't mean what he said. He was just kind of going along with the popular notion. Well, I don't know if this man even knew who Jesus was, because Jesus did anything but follow the popular notion. Jesus himself said, the opinions of men mean nothing to me. This is just one verse. One. Well, that's just what one verse, Chip. You can't build an argument on one verse. Well, fine. How about these verses? You want more? You want more? Jesus attributes Genesis 17 to Moses. Jesus attributes Exodus 3:6 to Moses. Jesus attributes Exodus 20 verse 12 to Moses. Jesus attributes Exodus 21 verse 17 to Moses. On. Paul attributes Moses writing this. The Jews attribute Moses writing this. The book attributed to Moses in the book of Hebrews, by Stephen, by Peter, by Jesus, by Paul, by the Sadducees, by the Paul. These are just the New Testament witnesses to how Moses wrote what he claims to have written. Now, if you have a problem with it, then you need to tell Peter, Paul, Stephen, Jesus, Luke, John, Jesus, that they were wrong about Mosaic authorship, that somehow they got it wrong. Modern scholars know better. To me, that is the height of hubris. You want to talk pride? You're just saying that all of these witnesses in the New Testament are basically liars. They're wrong. They didn't know better. They were just following ancient tradition. Modern scholarship knows better. We're smarter in the 20th century than they were in the first century. Why? Those stupid people thought the world was flat. Part of those stupid people, mind you, is Jesus. This is just the New Testament witness. I didn't put the Old Testament witness. What do you mean, the Old Testament witness? Deuteronomy 31 is one such example that comes to mind. Let me see if I can find it. Deuteronomy 31, verse 9. And Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who carry it in the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Well, what does that mean? It seems to mean that Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests to put it in the ark of the covenant. It doesn't. I don't see any muddling in that. Do you? Do you see any confusion in that verse? Moses wrote the law. It says. Well, you know. See, I tell you, whenever you hear these scholars go on, and that's the first phrase, well, you know. These are primitive, stupid people, and they think. Their reasoning is this. These redactors, these mysterious priests who put it all, they put that in there to give it authority. See, people are more willing to believe it if Moses wrote it than if we write it. So we're just going to put that in this story, and then the stupid people will follow it, and we've got all the power. Got it? It's a power play. It's a plot. That's what it is. It's a plot. And I go, really? It's such a good plot that somehow Jesus got the idea that Moses wrote this too, and he got bamboozled with the rest of us. Yes, Chris?
Look at verse 24.
Oh, well, that's not in my Bible. I cut that out because I don't believe in that verse. All right, I'll read it. When Moses had finished writing the words of this law in a book, to the very end, Moses commanded the Levites who carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord, take this book of the law and put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against you. For I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. Behold, while I am yet alive with you, today you have been rebellious against the Lord. How much more after my death? Did you hear that? Twice in one chapter it said what? Moses wrote this book. Well, shouldn't that just put this issue to bed? Why is there even an issue? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Because it can never be that easy for unbelieving scholars. It just can't. Because the minute we accept this, then we have to accept that God actually exists. God actually commanded the 10 Commandments. And, oh, I have to obey them if I hope to ever see heaven. I don't want to follow the 10 Commandments. Do you understand that? I want to live my life the way I feel I want to live my life. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me adultery is wrong. Don't tell me I can't have sex before marriage when I want, as often as I want, with whomever I want. Who are you to tell me what to do with my life? Do you get it? But if there is a God, and he did speak to Moses, and he did order him to write these commandments, then we have a problem, Houston. I can't do whatever I want and expect to just be welcomed into the heaven of God. Do you see that? You say, well, I think that that's very narrow-minded, Chip. I believe in a God of love. God loves me no matter what.
Very common.
All right, let me put it to you this way. I'm married, but I get to do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whomever I want. And my wife just has to suck it up and love me anyway. Right?
Wrong.
Oh, why is that wrong?
The Ten Commandments.
Forget the Ten Commandments. Why is that wrong?
Book of the laws.
What kind of human relationship is that? Huh? How long do you think she would stay with me? Not long if she's smart. Right? What kind of relationship is that? You get to go out and philander all that you want, and you expect to be married to me? You're nuts! Now think of it in terms of relationship to God. How do you expect to be in relationship to God if you don't live like God expects you to live? Well, I just don't believe in all those rules. Well, wait a minute. Aren't there rules in marriage? Aren't you, like, faithful until the end? So that means you can't do what you want, when you want, with whomever you want. You're faithful to your wife or husband. And if you don't want to live under that rule, then guess what? Don't get married. That's pretty simple. I don't see the problem here. But I'm telling you, my brothers and sisters, if we